The mic works. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the final joint event of the Dignity, Indimo, and TRIPS projects. We're running a bit behind schedule. There were some logistical issues we had to solve at the start, so let's get going. My name is Pedro Homem de Gouveia. I work at Polis. I'm honored and beyond pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I didn't work for the projects, so it's a special privilege, actually, to be able to spend the day with you and learn about your fantastic work. I coordinate governance and integration, and also safety and security for Polis. I also work on policy issues with the EU governing bodies. It's critically important, I think we all agree, to bring this dimension into transport policy. I do remember that many years ago when I started working on accessibility as an architect, I was just dropped into the transport department. And one of the first challenges I had to overcome was to be able to translate basic human rights concerns into a sector and a profession that was basically engineering-based, and where some of the colleagues would tell me, this was 20 years ago, I mean, that's all fine, but we don't do politics. I mean, we just do engineering here. We just move vehicles. And it took us a while to really deal with that very reductionist approach, which is obviously wrong, because as even any neurologist will explain, rational thinking has a basis in emotions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to decide. And that's why any sort of policy, design, even engineering, needs to have a base in values. Otherwise, it just goes round and serves no purpose. And obviously, that's why we need values and clear policy and social values and human values to guide any work on transport. Anybody who says otherwise really doesn't know what he or she is talking about. And that issue came with accessibility, and then it came back many years later when we started working on trying to deal with the issue of systematic sexual harassment of women in public transport settings. And again, the same issue was, hey, we do public transport. I mean, that's for the police or for women not to use miniskirts or whatever. And it's really a transport issue because, well, passengers are the responsibility of the public transport provider, and because also, I mean, beyond the human rights and even legal issues, we can't expect to be able to accelerate the shift to sustainable mobility if we ignore a basic aspect affecting more than half of the population. So, either you like it or not, this human and social dimension comes up back and back and back again. So we might as well tackle it from the beginning than just, deal with it as an afterthought. Anyway, so we will start by welcoming the Commission on stage. Mr. Andras Mogyoro. It's a Brussels challenge to figure out the pronunciation of people's families' names. I suffer the same problem, sorry. And Anca Pasca, where are you? I've seen you. Come on. Come out wherever you are. Please.
So thanks a lot for the invitation. Do you hear me?
As you wish.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
So thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very pleased to meet all of you today. I am coming from DG Mobility and Transport, from the unit called Social Aspect, Passenger Rights and Inclusion, where we work on the needs of different transport users. I have been working for this Directorate General for 10 years now, and I must admit that when I started to work, transport users were considered as a very, very generic group, and the special needs of different subgroups were not taken into consideration. Maybe some degree the needs of people with disabilities or reduced mobilities, or the needs of people in rural areas, but other vulnerable groups were not researched. And as in the previous presentation we heard, there are a lot of different group of people using transport, and these people have very, very different needs. So once you recognize this, then you face a lot of challenges, because in order to make policies that reflect these needs, you need to know what these needs are. And I have to tell you, 4 years ago I was dealing with the research study on multimodal journey planning for persons with disability, and very little material we had when we launched this project. One of the other difficulty that you face, that you want to talk with people representing these groups, and some of these groups have advocacy organizations like persons with disabilities, but it's much more difficult to reach out to other groups, like people who don't use social media or internet, or poor people, or other vulnerable groups that have special needs. So I was very, very pleased when I learned about this 3 project that tries to gather knowledge about the special needs of these groups. I was very happy that you get together at the same table the representative of different vulnerable groups with transport providers and local or regional policymakers. And I really hope that these connections that they make throughout these projects will last for a longer period, and will have a positive impact on urban and regional transport policies. We've made a study last year in my unit on the transport users and the future of mobility, and we recommend always to ask people with belonging to these vulnerable groups to participate in forming the transport policy, and also to build knowledge about their special needs. And I am very happy that these projects are about this, and especially about digital mobility. When we speak to representatives of persons with disabilities or other vulnerability groups, on the one hand, they have high expectations about digitalization, but on the other hand, they have a strong fear that they will be excluded because of their special circumstances. So I really welcome your intent to show policy measures that could include everybody in transport.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andras. Good morning to you all. Let me see. I have some slides. Let me see. Yes. Okay. I wanted to go back. Yes. Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anca Pasca. I work at the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, which has been settled by the European Commission. And we are in charge of managing projects. I have been very privileged to follow these 3 projects since the inception, because I have also conducted the evaluation on behalf of the Commission for the very numerous proposals which were submitted to us back in 2018. And this is a moment on which we should all capitalize, I think, in the agency, in the Commission, also in the civil society, because it was a big surprise to an agency so technical, like the one for which I work. It was a big surprise to see how much interest there is on such a small but exciting topic. Because like you see, so in our agency, I'll also show you a bit later the KPIs we have. We work on energy, we work on transport, environment, climate, on very technical topics. But in the end, it's all about the humans and the needs that you already started introducing this morning. So yes, I have been very privileged of following these projects in the 3 years, and I have to say that I'm very happy to see the results, and I'm happy to see the room full this morning. In my capacity as project advisor, I often work with Pedro because I'm also in charge of the road safety topic. But I'm also in charge of socioeconomic aspects related with transportation, and we will enter into detail a bit later. So very shortly on how do we share our work between European Commission and the agency. You will see here that the European Commission defines the policy, they define the strategy, objectives, and the work program on which you can come with applications in order to get funding for projects. The European Commission also makes the program decisions, and they select the projects for co-financing, whereas on our side, we organize the call for proposals on the work programs which have been published. We manage the project through the whole life cycle, so we follow the work of your teams and of these people in this room, in case you're not from the consortium. We read the deliverables, we give them feedback and request improvements if there is need, and then we ensure that the public funds which are being spent by these projects respect a sound financial management rules. In terms of research KPIs and research portfolio, so you all know that we have 2 main programs funding research and innovation. We have just closed the research on the topics of Horizon 2020, and since 2021 we work on Horizon Europe. By the way, you might be aware of the fact that we have, the Commission and the agency has published the new topics for 2023-2024. So I invite you that you go on social media and on our website to look at the future research opportunities for you. But what has happened in the period that we just closed and on which these 3 projects have received funding? Well, you see that there have been a lot of research topics, almost 170, and then there have been even more proposals submitted. Like I said, on this topic on which you received the funding, we had over 30 proposals, out of which we have selected 3. Which are your projects. And then there is a big contribution you see here only for the projects dealing with transport and innovation research. We have had in the period of 7 years for which that has been covered by the program Horizon 2020, we have had 2.6 billion of EU contribution. Now, I hope that this can still be seen. Here you see what we fund in terms of research and innovation in transport. And you will not be surprised, because you are all transport professionals and you know how things are. You will not be surprised when you see that out of these 417 projects, you will see that 2/3 of them are technology driven. Because, well, we need technology as well, and because there is a political will to improve the vehicles, be it on the road, in the aviation, or in waterborne. We have still had, you will agree that it's a very limited number, but at least they have the merit of existing. We have had 16 projects in this period dealing with socio-economic aspects of transportation, what some of you could also call social sciences and humanity projects. The amount, if I put the pointer, the amount is very small. It's only 1.7 of the huge billions which have been granted to technology. But, well, it also shows that your work is very important, because we don't have much. And that also you should be lobbying in order to show the results of your project and the importance that your project has in this technology-driven world. So yes, you will see socioeconomic above with a very small amount of funds, but 16 very important projects. So which were these projects? You probably know them, but in case you don't, I would like to mention some of the areas which were covered by this small but beautiful project. So your project looked at accessibility, inclusiveness, and equity of transport systems. We also had projects looking at changes in lifestyle, environmental and climate concerns, encouraging the participation of women in the transport systems, demographic change, the digital divide, and forward-looking activities for policy making. I think that you will all receive the slides after the event. You will see that I have included links for the different logos of the project. So if you want to have a look at their work, you will be able to access through the links, through the hyperlinks included, or you can also do a challenge, a research on your favorite research engine. But now very shortly on why did we fund this project is because we realized at commission level, like it has been said, and the society knows that when we plan our transport systems, we want to ensure that all members of the society can benefit from the digitalization of the transport. So we're here, and probably we have no issue when we plan our trips, but if we think about our parents or our grandparents, maybe they are not so easy at digitalization. So that was one of the reasons behind. So we wanted to make sure that there will be nobody excluded from the new transport design system. So we had this topic, and we requested in the work program that we had that several topics, several issues are addressed. So we started with the identification of main characteristic of demands, but also of the needs of all societal strata of transport users, and the identification of the obstacles to the appropriation of digital mobility. We also requested the projects to address the identification of the user requirements, the investigation between possible gender-related differences, to look at the skills and strategies needed to fulfill the benefits from digitalization, the differences in adoption of the new solutions across samples in the different member states, and last but not least, to address policy recommendations in order to improve the situation we have at the moment. So these were the different aspects that we requested the project to address with their research work that lasts for 3 years. Each one of the projects that you will hear from today concentrated on several aspects, which this makes their work even more interesting because it's also complementary, and as such, the 3 projects, they fully cover the different aspects we have requested them. Now, what we will do with their research and with their work, it's on my last slide. There is clearly a need for the research and for the results that you have provided. And from our side and from your side as researchers and project implementers with work packages called exploitation, dissemination, we will have to help the policymakers design appropriate regulatory frameworks, making them more aware of the specific needs of users and making also sure that they will think more automatically about these basic issues when they design the policies. And of course, we should also think about the regional and local authorities who are involved in the design of the digital transport solutions and make them better tailored to all citizens' needs. And with this, I will close my presentation and I hand it over to you, Pedro. Thank you.
Thank you. So now you know where's the target to hit with the final project recommendations. Thank you very much, Anca and Andras. We will move on. We're trying to catch up with the delay. We will move on to the next panel here. 3 projects, face-to-face, the one-stop shop towards inclusive mobility. We will have short project introductions. We will start with Indimo. Where's Imre? And you will always, and I will ask, the thing that the organization gave me on the script is that each coordinator has 7 minutes, no more, no less, so you can get your clocks and see if Imre can fit the time. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And let me also welcome you in the name of Indimo to this great event. And as Anca said, small and beautiful, but I think 3 small projects can actually create, hopefully, big impact. So let's see very briefly what was Indimo about. It's very challenging to give you an overview in 7 minutes. It feels like my PhD defense where I had 15 minutes to talk about 4 years of research. But we are lucky here because we have the whole day to go into details, and our colleagues from each of the 3 projects will give you more insights through the rest of the event today. So let's jump to it. Indeed, Indimo was one of the projects addressing the issues that Anca already outlined to help the key stakeholders in digital mobility to design better solutions, better services, and also better policies. We worked in this project with 15 great partners. And the project itself was led by the VUB by the Mobilize research group. But why did we actually need this project? And I brought actually only 3 quotes from the research we did in the project, interviews with people in vulnerable situations who don't use digital mobility solutions. The first one is, I don't have a smartphone yet, but I'm planning to use one. My partner helps me by checking Google Maps and Street View. So there are still many people who actually don't have a smartphone or not the latest smartphone or not with the latest operating system. Then the second one, I don't know how to read a map. well, many or most of the applications that we use for digital mobility actually assume that you are able to find your location or where you need to pick up a car-sharing vehicle or an e-scooter. Or the third one, not having to learn too many new things is a must. The simpler, the better. The less, the better. And that actually shows how even more complex applications are becoming. And it also creates a barrier to many people to understand how they can register, how they can use a digital application. So based on this motivation, the project set out 5 key objectives, which I'm not going to detail because actually these objectives responded to the core requirements that Anca set out, to really look at the needs of populations in vulnerable situations, to assess the requirements, to co-create tools to help the key stakeholders, and also to transfer all these findings into policy making. And which were the groups that we considered in Indimo? Well, there is a really wide range of people in vulnerable situations, and I'm sure that the other projects also really had a wide range of groups to address, including people with lower income, including people living in rural areas, language difficulties because they belong to an ethnic minority or they are foreigners, also people with different impairments or disabilities, but also people lacking digital skills. So how did we address this challenge that many of these population groups are not or haven't been able to use car-sharing applications, e-scooters, or even booking systems? We focused on 4 of the key stakeholder groups in the digital mobility ecosystem: the developers of the applications of the services, the operators of these services, the policymakers who can create regulations and minimum requirements and guidelines to make mobility more inclusive and accessible, and also citizens, which covers both users and non-users of these services. We built our methodology on the concept of the universal design, which originally comes from architecture, and then it was transferred to infrastructure. And we transferred this concept of universal accessibility to the digital mobility world or systems. And we also extended it with 2 key elements, and that is social, spatial, and economic equity. So services should be also affordable and spatially accessible. But also we realized through our research that cybersecurity and the protection of private data are really key barriers to many people to use digital mobility services. Just some key numbers. We have worked a lot of stakeholders from all these stakeholder groups through our co-creation process, both at the pilot, at the local level, through communities of practice, and my colleague Floridea will give details on this later on, but also we had a great co-creation community which involved really the key stakeholders to co-create key tools. And I don't have time to really talk about the findings themselves, so let me just highlight 4 of the key findings about the needs of people in vulnerable situations. The first one is that technology must be accompanied by a friendly interface, channel, and assistance. That's key for people in vulnerable situations to access these services. It's very important that there is a human contact point provided. It can be via a phone line, via chat, or in person, to help people to really register and go through the booking process or other processes that are needed. Data security and privacy have been highlighted as key barriers, as I said. And finally, the proper coupling of the digital experience and the physical experience is very important. You could have the best digital interface, very inclusive as well, but if you cannot find the car-sharing vehicle, if you cannot get into the vehicle, or if you cannot drive out of the parking place, then basically the whole process has failed. So what are the key outputs of the project? We have created the Indimo Digital Mobility Toolbox, and this is already available on our website in English and also soon in 5 other languages, in French, Dutch, German, Spanish, and Italian. You can also find on your tables printed versions of the toolkit, some of the tools from the toolkit. And it's really a flexible toolkit. You can choose which trajectory you want to do on the website, how much time you have, what you want to achieve through this toolkit. Do you want to self-evaluate, for example, a digital service and see how inclusive and accessible that is? Do you want to browse through the recommendations? This is all possible. The toolkit consists of the Universal Design Manual, which focuses on how to develop inclusive and accessible interfaces for example, mobile and web applications. The Universal Interface Language Manual, which is linked to this first one, giving advice on how to make icons that are used in applications more accessible and not confusing. And then we also provide guidelines for cybersecurity and privacy assessment. And all these guidelines are not long documents, 150 pages, but very interactive elements on the website, and you can easily access templates and also follow the process. We also have a set of more than 50 recommendations that you can browse through a database, and you can filter these recommendations. And finally, all these tools come together in the so-called service evaluation tool, which is also an online tool. It's a questionnaire of more than 70 questions, and you can assess for a concrete service how accessible and inclusive that is. And my colleagues Rebecca and Hannes will give you a walkthrough of this tool later on after the lunch. So please visit already our website and try our tools. And we have developed, co-created these tools and tested them in 5 pilot projects. One in Antwerp, where we worked with people with visual disabilities to develop an application that can help them to cross a traffic light when there is not an audio signal. In Berlin, we worked with a startup who developed an application for ride-sharing to design a safety button in this application to help especially women to travel more safe in shared vehicles. In Italy, in Emilia-Romagna, in the village of Mogyoro, in cooperation with the Poste Italiane and ITL, we set up a smart delivery box. In Galilee, in Israel, we worked on an informal ride-sharing service, especially for women in rural areas. And finally, in Madrid, we worked with a local company who delivers healthy food to people in vulnerable situations to make this application and the service more inclusive. So that's the project in a nutshell. So thank you very much, and you will hear more about Indimo and also the other project during the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Really, really, really cool. I can see this working in the real world. Really cool. Thank you, Imre. Let's move on to Silvia Gaggi from Dignity. Yes! A round of applause. 7 minutes for you too, Silvia.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, I have more or less the same introduction as Imre, because it's really difficult to... Oops. Okay.
Please.
It's really difficult It's really difficult to summarize 3 years. Just tell me where to go. Okay, good. Okay, it's really difficult to summarize 3 years of an exciting project full of research activities, exchanges, wonderful partnership in 7 minutes. I will try to do my best. And I would like to start by saying that for us, Dignity is not just an acronym, because it's the real objective of the project. And actually, we came with the title before even conceiving the concept, because this is exactly what we wanted to do. Dignity is to recognize that everyone is important and has a value. And translated into the mobility sector means to give the opportunity for everyone to travel with dignity, despite income, age, disability, nationality, or even gender. So this was really the main objective of the project, and we gathered a group of 14 partners that, how do you do this? Yeah. So what we call the research team that set the theory of the project, and representatives from 4 local authorities across Europe, from Barcelona, from Ancona in Italy, from Tilburg in the Netherlands, and from the Flanders regions here in Belgium, to test our theory and validate the outcomes that we can now replicate across Europe. Local authorities from the pilot region, partners in the project, so committed to the idea. And we also had the private sector, like Nextbike, car sharing provider, and My Cicero, travel journey planner and ticketing. So quite a good mix already in the partnership. So, but what we wanted to do, we were very ambitious at the beginning. We wanted to solve everything. So we wanted to create an approach able to make the digital transport ecosystem inclusive and accessible to everyone. What do we need to have it? We need products and services that are inclusive and accessible, what we call the meso level in the middle. But we also need to change governance models. We need new governance models where there is more cooperation, not only within the administration and the different units, but also outside with the stakeholders and the end users, so the macro level, and always with a look at the final user, focusing on the individuals, their needs, their requirements, and involving them in the formulation of policies and in the design of products and services. So the 3 dimensions always need to work together. And what we need to do to bridge the digital gap, to solve the problem, we need first of all to frame it. So see where the problem lies. Is it a matter of lack of support from the governance level, or are the products not good enough, inclusive enough? And then we need to bridge the gap. We propose solutions to do it. And of course, we need to evaluate if the process was successful and the progress we made. So this is what we tested, different methods, different tools. Some of them I'm not going into details. We will see during the day most of them. Some of them are quantitative, some are qualitative. It's a good mix. Some of them are methods that are successful, that proved to be successful in the past, but we adjusted them to dignity and to our purposes. And we also created new tools like the digital gap self-assessment, which is a very good starting point to frame your context. And as I said, we tested and validated all the methods in the 4 pilot regions. What we are happy to announce is that at the end of all the testing, validation and testing, we moved from a theoretical approach to a very practical toolkit, where all these methods are, you have now ready-to-use guidelines to replicate them in your context. You can go for the full cycle, or you might have a specific need, so you can pick one of the tools that we propose for all the phases. And we also have recommendations at the end, like Indimo and like all the 3 projects. So this is the final output, but I just wanted to, if I can, here. Just a couple of intermediate, very important outputs that we achieved. I heard Indimo talking about the non-users. Yeah, we carried out a survey across Europe in 5 countries. We interviewed face-to-face. In COVID time was not an easy task, I can tell you. Around 3,500 people. Not only representatives from the so-called vulnerable to exclusion group, but people, so everyone. And we made a benchmark of what could be, what are the factors that might hamper the use of technology. Because, I mean, in the mobility sector or in any other sector, if you don't know how to use an app, if you don't own a smartphone or if you don't have access to technology, then all the new products and services that, we benefit all from, certain people will for sure be excluded. This helped us to create like a exclusion calculator with which we then assessed some available apps that, some of them, we all know them, and spot good examples. We have an interactive catalog with 32 examples of apps or services that we think have some features which are particularly good to be inclusive to most of the people, and in particular to some vulnerable to exclusion groups. So I invite you to check on the website. These are quite good results that we achieved. And just to end, I talked about the pilots. What happened to them? From the beginning to the end of the project, we can, we'll have testimonials at the end. I hope they will agree with me. These are regions that now have a very clear mapping of the local context in all the areas that I mentioned. So the population, the governance, the model, and what can be improved. And of the offer of digital mobility services in the context. All of them, they work on specific services, and thanks to the inclusive design wheel approach, they improved the apps or the services. Sometimes it's easy, just a visual clarity or adding specific information. Step by step, we can achieve more inclusiveness in what we already have. And they also worked at the policy level with all the stakeholders, and now they created long-term strategies. It takes time, and action plans to move towards a universally accessible travel ecosystem. So this is a bit of the story. Again, no time to tell everything. There will be more during the day, but just for you to know, we are issuing final publications where the story will be explained in more detail with the theory, but also what happened in the pilot and how we progressed to a more accessible and inclusive digital transport.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Silvia. Let's go to Kristina Andersen. Trips, where are you, Kristina? Come on stage. Yay! And that's 7 minutes for you too, huh?
Yes, I know. So, I'm not Kristina. Kristina could not be here today. My name is Yes, right. Hello. Yes. Okay, so I am not Kristina Andersen. Kristina unfortunately could not join us today. My name is Tal Hadjakis. I'm the deputy coordinator of the TRIPS project. So I will play Kristina's role for this presentation. Okay. The TRIPS project, well, it has its own challenges. We did not address so many different groups. We just focused on the needs of disabled citizens. So we 11 partners work with 7 European cities to devise solutions, especially addressing the needs of not a particular group of persons with disabilities, but all of them. So we work with colleagues in Bologna, and in Brussels, and in Cagliari, and in Sofia, Stockholm, Lisbon, and Zagreb. We work together to demonstrate 2 things. One, how to co-design with persons with disabilities, because there is a lot of open innovation out there in terms of processes, but none of them is really tailored to empowering them with their special needs to take part in the innovation process, not just take part as in we asking them questions, but actually lead the process and be core part of the process. We also focused this as a premise of if they help us design inclusive transport systems, they will be inclusive for everyone because they are the section of the population that face most challenges. So we brought together pan-European networks of users, Enil, that Laura represents Enil today. Yes, you can see her here. Assistive technology experts from AAAT, David. And also DLR and UITP. Is Hilia here with us? Yay, Hilia. So the transport sector. We brought everyone together to start a conversation and a discussion between these networks and help them collaborate. And of course, other partners like methodology experts from TUE, Elvia? Yes, and system integrator experts, Chino and your team. Hello, everyone. And of course, my company, Trilateral, looking at the privacy aspects of solutions designed. So our ambition was to make public transport more accessible for those who face the most barriers in society. We did that through co-design, a co-production, throughout the entire project, from beginning, and when I'm saying from beginning, from inception, to prioritization, to development, to evaluation. We did this all together with the users, from the beginning. So we didn't set the priorities, we didn't look at the pre-existing solutions, we started together from scratch. So our approach is to design, describe, and demonstrate the practical steps. We wanted to give out practical steps on how to do it that place people with disabilities at the core of open innovation, at the center, not on the side that we ask them questions and validate some testing. Well, and how did we do that? We actually co-designed the very process of open innovation with them. With them, by them, and for them. That is our motto. To support these groups to take this leading role in designing their everyday environment, because we believe the process is not going to be only useful for transport solutions, but for urban planning and for building furniture. It doesn't matter. It's the process that mattered here. So by focusing on the experience and their needs, we were actually able to see the blend of how their barriers interact with the AIDS and the health issues they're facing, and even languages, because we worked across Europe in very different languages. And we realized as well that persons with disabilities don't know English, or they don't study as a second language, many of them, so we had to work in their local language to produce these solutions. And also in the different cultures, right? So what did we actually produce? Well, we produced mobility solutions in the 7 cities. A lot had to do with an accessible journey planner, a real-time accessible journey planner that provides information about the accessibility of your end-to-end journey. Not just a little sign on some station that there is an elevator. That's not good enough. The accessibility starts from literally your doorstep to reaching your destination, and there are no solutions at the moment that provide real-time information. So that means you can embark on a journey, and then at some point there's a gap. There is a ramp missing, there is an elevator not functioning, and you're stuck. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to provide an end-to-end solution for that. And we work with experts across the cities and in working groups in each and every city to create solutions to overcome this. We also created a tool that we can crowdsource the auditing of the accessibility of cities by people with disabilities. So we created a framework with them, by them, for them, with factors that matters about their accessibility. We turned this into a framework. And with the help of T-Bridge, we actually have developed the app that you can all download now from the App Store. And it's available on Android and on Apple. So if you want to assess the accessibility of your cities, go ahead and play with our app. And this is available also for persons with visually impaired. So we try to make the app accessible as well. We also envision to take this a step further, but will talk to you about our ambition on how this can be part of the auditing of urban transport systems in the future. I'll leave that to Chino, though, for later. And of course, we created the very method. We have demonstrated, we have documented how we develop the method, how we use the method, and also developed like a toolkit that provides training material on video and with exercises so people can follow on our step, because it is important for others to be able to replicate what we did for their organization. As part of the toolkit, we have also created a MOOC, an open online university course in Coursera. So this is also available from our website and also on the Coursera platform. We hope that this will we will broaden the audience and people who can use this in the future to co-design with disabled citizens. In terms of our policy recommendation, and I personally will talk about this a little in more depth later on, but we signed the LECO declaration this summer between AAATE, UITP, and ENIL, laying down the main principles and priorities of working together in the future to satisfy. And we have opened this now to be consigned by other members and other organizations. So if you're interested, please do have a look and join us. We have a white paper that is already distributed to the European Disability Intergroup, and that is promoting some of our recommendations. A very succinct paper of recommendation, and on the back of this, UITP is leading the TRIPS roadmap, so we are laying out what should be the priorities for the next 10 years for the sector to make accessibility happen. And we are hoping to develop the European Observatory on Accessibility that uses the MDI app that I presented before to measure the accessibility and measure progress towards the accessibility agenda. We also have some other things in mind in terms of how do we develop the capacity, how we help people with disabilities develop their skills and take part in the process. Also societal impact, how to stimulate the importance of accessibility design and demonstrate feasibility and value. And we do a lot of lobbying, and as much lobbying, and we will lobby you as well towards that, because we all have the common agenda. And we also try to, of course, affect the academic sector and write a lot about this. So this is just some of the papers, academic papers we have put forward for dissemination within the sector and for people to take it forward. More than that as well, but okay. This is just a sample. And that's my presentation on behalf of Kristina.
Before you go, Tali, oops, give me that, thank you. Wait, so Imre over there and Silvia, if you could just come here. Just so we have to before we move on, I really have to stick a question here. So we see very solid work I mean, and if I was leading one, if a public transport organization, a public transport authority, I see solid work in methods and tools. So, looking at each other's projects, just one question, okay? Looking at each other's projects, I mean, what would you pick if there's something that really, you find, I'd like to pick that and integrate in the methods and tools that I developed. If you could pick something from Imre's project or from Tali's project, what would that be? Unscripted question, huh? They'll kill me for this.
Exactly.
Come here.
What I like
Come.
in trips is really the focus on one specific group to go deep into the needs and what we can do for them. So I would pick the focus on a group which is particularly important in society. So it's from Indimo, I would pick all the part related to cybersecurity and data, which we don't have in Dignity, and it's actually, it's fundamental, especially when we are talking about digital services and tools. So it's, I would pick everything. So I mean, you asked me for,
okay.
You asked me for,
yeah. Imre, what about you?
Yeah, I think our projects are very much complementary. So from Dignity, what I would like to highlight is probably all the quantitative data you have through all these hundreds or thousands of surveys. And in that respect, Indimo went more on the qualitative pathway with semi-structured interviews. I think these two elements are very complementary to each other, so that's very nice. But also the tool that you developed for the self-assessment of the current situation, I think that's complementary to the tool that we developed to solve that situation and to solve the issues. And from trips, what I also like is that you visualize and quantify the accessibility of a city or a neighborhood. I think that's very much needed because policymakers don't want to read long text. They want to see a number and a short recommendation.
True.
If we can do that, that can really help to make progress.
Yeah. Tali.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, so as you said, everything, but I think our toolkit and your tools, we actually need to do that. Like, we need to find how we can link these two, because that will give the audience a wider toolkit of the process, and you know, we are complementary in what we have created in terms of toolkits, so we need to look into that. From your project, I really like the governance aspect, because unless we have change the governance structures and the synergies across agencies, we will not be able to affect change. So also, of course, the fact that we are looking at a very specific, I wouldn't say niche, because there are 130 million disabled citizens. So it's not a niche market. But if we can show that their needs is the same with other groupings, then it's not, we are not, might be small projects, but we're talking about the majority of an aging population in Europe. So we are the majority, not the guy in the e-scooter, just being 20-something. So.
Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
One more round of applause. Let's move to the next panel. 3 projects face-to-face. I'm sorry. The power of co-creation. I don't see well. I'm limited in my vision. The power of co-creation, collaborating with stakeholders for more inclusion. So we will start to do this. We will start with Floridea. Where are you, Floridea? Each project has 10 minutes to show their stuff.
This is to go.
I hope so, yes.
The green one?
Yes.
Okay.
Does this work for you? Do you want to hold it?
I think that I
Yeah.
can take. No, it's okay, it's okay.
Va bene così.
No, sì, va bene così. Okay.
Sorry, I ruined the microphone.
No, was not. Va bene così. Okay, okay, it's very nice to see you all, and happy to see you here. And as well, very with a lot of emotion with this starting point from Pedro about human rights and in transport technical aspect. And this is take me to one thing that was said yesterday in another working group about human rights and climate change that are very near each other, and by responsible of a caucus of disability, of people with disability. He was thanking people who were fighting for their rights within the COP27 in the different arena, one in loss and damage, another one in action, climate empowerment. So we are all of us in the same shape. And as well, I like very much the reference of Anca to this, to work on in this, we need to be in love. And this is something that we always stress in the advocacy arena. So this is, we are all here like a more we do advocacy finally in this kind of project, because of course it's not for the mainstreaming is going to the technology that sometimes is the part of solution, but sometimes can as well be part of the problem. So I think that this is something that I would like to stress here. And of course, about the co-creation. Yesterday I was in the plane and the person just near me told me, but you are working in mindfulness. I said, actually not, but yeah, it's true that the space that we create in the co-creation are like a safe space, collaborative space, and sometimes in some picture that you can see now, you can see that maybe, yes, it's something of mindfulness, or in any case, just to slow down. That is something that we need to learn to do, and to see what is really needed for people in a situation of vulnerability. And this is something that reminds me that we need to stop to call people like disabled people or vulnerable people. It's just the society that puts people in this situation. So it's better to use these kind words that are already, that have some legal reference in Paris Agreement and paragraph 11 of the Paris Agreement of climate change, of course. And so what we decide to do in Indimo, already in the stage of the proposal, was to use this tool that is a community of practices that are a way to realize and implementing as well what we today call like the just transition without trying to not leaving any person behind. And why I said that? Because in just transitions, the three tenets of the just transition are recognizing people in situation of vulnerability, are procedural, means to involve all stakeholders for co-design and co-create, and the third one is to distributive, in this way to well distribute goods and bads. So what we started to do in the Indimo project at the beginning was to create this space that at the beginning some people were, even about the co-partner, were very enthusiastic, some other not so much, because of course when you create a space of this, always you need to deal with the frustration. It's very complex to ask people to meet together, people, and so on. And then we realized that it was like the space where we can test, we can co-design, we can evaluate what we were doing. So, and with people who were really users, non-users, people in a situation of vulnerabilities, like all the 12, I think, profile that we have, and so on. And So this community of practices were created in each pilot with different, the community of practices, the definition is to create a common knowledge, but as well to empower people who participate in this community. And of course, all of them have different kind, each of them has different kind of perspective, goal, and different actors. So if we were in Berlin, of course, the leader was more related to the technology, so the community of practices has some different aspects. And then some, as well, some related, cultural related aspect. And when you deal with a human space, collaborative human space, always the results could be different, even if you use the same methodology. So we use this space for the phase 1, for co-creating the requirements, because the basic, the stack of the project of Indimo is really to go to check the requirements of each profile and each person in a situation of vulnerability. And we come out with the 192 recommendations that actually were too many. We know that we did this first version of UDM quite long, because there was a lot of materials there. And then we used, once again, the community of practices for selecting this recommendation and to starting to co-design with the people involved in there, user, non-user, operators, developers, because it was really the objective of the project was, like Imre highlighted, to put together people and find a solution, to go out from this expertise approach and to go more on the common knowledge. That is where experts needs to be there, but as well people. So this is the idea. And then this is a little bit an overview of the all COPs that we manage. It's not a very nice picture, but I think that it's important to show where people were, when they meet each other, and how and for what. And then if we go to the role of COPs, of course, co-creating and co-designing pilot application, but the application there were really, the application and services were really the place where we test what we would like to achieve. That was then the toolbox. And this is some pictures that Gianni included in these slides, and are really showing how different things have been done in the community of practices, from coding in direct way in Madrid, or from put a lot of ideas in the same mirror with a lot of bubbles, and in Galilee, and or in Anvert with including more technical aspects for the service and the application they were developed. And then what I was thinking, okay, what we can take from this experience, because community of practices, if you go on the European Union webpage, you can find a lot of community of practices and methodology. Now it's quite used methodology, it's not a novelty, but I think that, like I said, each human space has changed a little bit, and I was thinking that the best way to present the evaluation was to present the results of an exercise that we managed to do within the Indimo partners, with the different kind of people who were organizing the COPs, who were participating regularly, or who were participating only for some specific activities, who just used the results just for the evaluation or whatever, or people who never get in the community of practices. And I was thinking that this was the best way to show you what is the result. The post-it. And and what we see is, so we asked them the perception and attitude. How do you feel when you were there? Intimacy, fun, interesting things, anecdotes, and so on. Some organizers said some sense of frustration. To manage and to facilitate a community of practices or to advocate for something, you need to have a very high level of tolerance to frustration. This is for sure. This is not just we need to show that, we need to say that, just this is one thing. Then very committed to find the right approach, methodology to facilitate the participation, so related to the facilitation. Like I think that in this transition from the expert point of view to the more collaborative knowledge, we need really to give a role, we need to invest in the training of facilitators. This is something that is really important. And then never participate due to the lack of time, but maybe I would like to go in. The definition of the COPs, there as well is important to think about that. The experience that you take from the COP, a driver groups of stakeholders or a creation space where stakeholders develop together a project, a community of people that periodically meet each other. And this was really what happened there. And then, yes, I finished. And then, would you use the COP? Somebody said yes. Of course, somebody said with Cambiamo leadership, but just because, once again, you need to have people who can facilitate. We need to create these skills. Maybe this is just a call for thinking about a next program as well. And it's good, but a good way to make people participating and so on. And then just to finalize, do we need a critical thinking level by the participant to run a COP? Because this is a really key point. We are just in a context where there is a lot of climate assemblies and so on, but always we ask too much to participants. And then maybe we need as well to go a little bit down in these exigence to the people, because users, non-users are there for providing things the time they are there. We cannot ask them to do some homework. This is something that is important. And finally, culturally dependent, the COP. Actually, the answers are very interesting. Somebody said no, somebody says yes, but in the way how they work. Nobody said no, in this context we cannot use the COP. So this is something that is really important. This is the last slide I would like to show you, and happy to answer to your question during the day. Thank you.
I think I just saw my colleague Daniel jumping on a roof. I'll have to report to you, you know. So let's move on. This is really interesting. I mean, I think we could just flood Floridea with questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the time. But I know from the program that we'll have discussion time in roundtables, in coffee break. I hear there's going to be lunch. And so there'll be a great opportunity to squeeze insights and advice and practical advice from each other. So moving on to Sam Delespaul. Delespaul? Yes? From Dignity. Ready to go? Can I start the clock? I'm kidding. Yeah. 10 minutes for you. Take care.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Sam, I'm from Mobile 21, pilot coordinator in the Dignity Project. And I would like to talk to you about the co-creation within the Dignity Project. And I would like to start with shortly describing the co-creation that we did in Dignity. I will let the ambulance pass by. Because co-creation is really a common thread throughout the whole process of Dignity, or a red wire, as we say in Dutch, hence the picture of a red wire. So co-creation is really part of the core of the Dignity approach and the Dignity toolkit. And it's organized in different forms depending on the tool that we're talking about. But there is always two aspects involved. On the one hand, we, like Silvia already mentioned, we really focus on involving end users throughout the whole process of Dignity. On the other hand, there is also the goal of bringing different stakeholders together with the aim of designing better policy, more inclusive policy, and better accessible services. So throughout the whole Dignity approach, the whole Dignity toolkit that is shown there, co-creation is always part of it. And we see this already in the framing phase, so where we want to get an idea of what the digital gap on a local level actually is. And already here, there is profound user engagement involved. So participation of end users is included, especially during the more qualitative methods of the framing phase, like customer journey mapping and focus groups. We go really into deep conversation with these end users from specific target groups to enable them to share their experiences. And in that way, we can create the full picture about the digital gap in mobility, what it actually means to be digitally excluded in mobility. On the other hand, we have this digital gap self-assessment, and we noticed there that it's really valuable and important to involve different stakeholders, service providers, transport operators, different departments within the administration, to involve all these stakeholders to really complete this digital gap self-assessment, and again, to get the full idea of the digital gap in mobility on a local level. But of course, the real co-creation takes place during the bridging phase, where we want to bridge this digital gap that we have framed in the first phase. And especially in its main two processes of the bridging phase, that includes design wheel and the scenario building. The inclusive design wheel is all about designing more accessible, better usable services and products. And during this process, each pilot organized at least one co-creation session with the target groups. These sessions take 1 to 3 hours at least. During these sessions, the idea is to go into conversation with these end users, to explore user needs, and for the end users to share their ideas for solutions. So instead of building or designing a service and then going to the end users and ask them, okay, what do you think about this? No, we really involve them from the start and building concepts based on their ideas that they can share during these co-creation sessions. Then we have the scenario building, where the idea is to draft more inclusive policy and develop scenarios. And here, each pilot, again, organized different workshops, 2 or 3, where different stakeholders are brought together. Stakeholders include policymakers, administration, transport operators, service providers, user representatives, again, and also actual end users. So key actors on digitalization, mobility, and social inclusion are brought together to identify key factors and building scenarios, which then in turn can inform strategy development and policy recommendations. So this is really, really briefly the co-creation within our project. And this co-creation led to a lot of valuable insights and delivered, of course, interesting results. And I would like to present to you today 5 key lessons or takeaways that we have learned from this co-creation process within Dignity. The first being that the user perspective should always be the starting point. We should start designing policy and services from the user needs. This starts maybe even earlier with understanding the problem, framing the gap. To create a deep, full understanding of the digital gap in mobility, user engagement is essential so that we can really understand their perspective and start from there. Understanding their perspective is crucial for more inclusive services and to draft inclusive policy. And we cannot fully understand this user perspective without engaging with the end users, especially more vulnerable users. So, and it's clear from what we have learned, is that they are eager to share their ideas and experience. They are really ready and able to share their ideas, share their input, share their experiences. Users really want to be heard. But importantly, they have to be given the opportunity. We as researchers or transport operators, policymakers, we cannot sit and wait for them to come to us. We have to take a proactive role. We have to create a space where user engagement can happen. Importantly, this should be given proper thought. And this brings me to my next point, is that organizing proper co-creation is not an easy task. It takes considerable time and effort. But if you put in this time and effort, the results are even more valuable and satisfying. This applies not only to user engagement, but also when organizing workshops with relevant stakeholders, bringing them together, organizing valuable sessions takes time and effort. We also learned from pilot experience that certain groups are harder to reach, but taking the effort is really worth it to reach them, because the input of these hardest to reach people is often the input that we're looking for. And of course, during COVID, we all experienced how important it is for co-creation to be able to organize live sessions. It can be organized digitally, but we're talking about digital inclusion here, so I think the importance of face-to-face contact is shown again. Co-creation is not only important to deliver tangible results, but at least equally important is the social aspect and the learning experiences that co-creation delivers. Co-creation, by bringing different stakeholders together, leads to better mutual understanding. It enables us to learn from each other and better understand not only each other's perspective, which in itself is already really valuable, but also better understanding the problem, the topic at hand, and how we can tackle it. For instance, the Inclusive Design Wheel promoted social learning on new aspects related to inclusiveness and awareness raising, especially for service providers. The scenarios that were developed through co-creation, through the scenario building, were highly valued by policymakers and the administration. And this leads me to my last takeaway. All stakeholders highly value if you proper organize co-creation. So another argument to really put in the effort to organize this co-creation. All participants to workshops, co-creation sessions, focus groups mentioned that they really appreciated the opportunity to speak and to discuss with each other. They were really satisfied, not only with the organization, but also with the results. They described it as enriching, not only on a personal level, but also on a professional level. That they can take away a lot of output when drafting policy strategies or designing new services. And lastly, but certainly not least importantly, co-creation is empowering. Participants are heard, they learn new perspectives, they can take away a lot of new ideas, and this way co-creation leads to better usable, more usable services and better inclusive policies. So, thank you very much.
Really good, thanks, Sam. We will move on to Elvia. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Elvia Vasconcelos de Gouveia. She's Portuguese. And we found out during lockdown in a Teams meeting that we were cousins. So that's not why she's speaking here, okay? She made it on her own. Your floor is yours, Elvia.
Thank you, Pedro. Obrigada.
You can do it in Portuguese. I get it.
In Portuguese? It's all
Yes.
Great. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself so that you know where I'm speaking from. So my name is Elvia Vasconcelos de Gouveia. I'm a doctoral candidate at the Technical University of Eindhoven. Better?
Baixa o microfone. Isso. Perfect.
And in the past 2.5 years, I've been working very closely with the groups in the 7 pilot cities of TRIPS. Before I joined the project, I spent more than 7 years working mostly with the UK government in roles where I was responsible for creating collaborative processes to bring civil society into large-scale digital transformation projects. So to set the scene, in the next 8 minutes or so, I believe, I'll be telling you a little bit about our approach to co-design in TRIPS. And to give the plot away, the main point that I would like to share with you today is that for us in the project, co-design has really been about creating this shared ownership of our processes, where the groups involved are actively involved as equal contributors, and this means that they hold agency and decision-making power throughout the process. And this is the main thing that I want to leave with you today. So this shared ownership starts from the beginning. And a defining aspect of TRIPS is that 7 groups were constituted as part-time paid members of staff in the project. And these 7 groups were constituted entirely of persons with disabilities, and they were there from the beginning until the end. And in constituting these groups as paid members of staff, we're guaranteeing that their work, their time, their experiences, their knowledge is not only valued and acknowledged, but it's also supported by the structure of the project. And as I've heard from many of the groups, that in the conversations that I had with the groups, a lot of the times persons with disabilities are expected to give their time for free, because, under the assumption that because they will be the ones benefiting from this, they should be willing to give their time away, and that they can also give their time away for free. And this is something that we need to consider a lot more going forward. So having the group set up was just our starting point, and then we had to find ways of nurture this shared ownership throughout our process. And so I'd like to share with you 3 practical strategies that we've used throughout the project to do this. And none of the things that I will be telling you today is like new, unheard of insight, because I'm sure that you're all plenty experienced in this kind of work. But these were practical things that we have learned pay off in terms of creating a working process where people feel not only acknowledged, but also honored and happy to be part of. So the first practical strategy has to do with listening, and how listening is the first step towards building, complete ownership of a process. The second one has to do with describing and revising our approaches regularly to meet the emerging needs of the groups as the project progressed. And then finally, the third practical strategy is about mobilizing knowledge for action. So the first thing we have learned is that ownership starts with having a say, being heard, and being taken seriously. And this required us to listen and to use our working structure to support each of the groups in creating their point of view and finding their voice in the project. And once they had developed this point of view, then it was about placing those points of view at the center of our planning and our processes. And ultimately, this is a thing that builds up towards full ownership, which means that the groups are in control of determining what these processes are used for and how they will manifest in their lives and in their cities in this case. The second strategy that we use to build shared ownership has to do with being really descriptive about our approaches. And we use these descriptions as a surface to discuss and shape our methods collaboratively. These discussions brought up the specific needs of each of the groups, and this allowed us to constantly revise and adjust our methods to address and meet those needs as we were progressing in the project. So as an example, in the beginning, the groups needed a lot of support because they were trying to figure out and navigate the structure of the project. And so that meant that our work was very prescriptive and very much led by the researchers. But as the groups grew a little bit more comfortable into their roles, there was a lot more space and capacity for them to take the lead and to make the tasks and the work really their own. And this meant that other needs and wants emerged, and because we were working with 7 different groups, the needs and the wants were very different for each of the groups. But we were able to monitor these needs and respond to them. And for instance, a year into the project, the group signaled a lot more appetite to learn and exchange from the other cities. And so we took that as a mandate to maximize any peer-to-peer exchange in our work. So what we've learned is that being descriptive and revising our approaches very regularly allowed us to meet the evolving needs of each of the groups. And so the third practical strategy that I'll share with you today has to do with mobilizing knowledge for action. And this is the final step in this kind of simplified journey towards full ownership that I've been talking about now. And just to recap, so this journey starts by having a say, being heard and taken seriously. Then it's about collaboratively shaping our methods in a way that meets the emerging and evolving needs of the groups. And ultimately, this builds up towards this full ownership, which is about determining what a process is used for. And for us, this final step has really to do with this question around how can we mobilize the resources of the project towards the practical, feasible, and incremental outcomes that each of these groups prioritizes in this project. And this was enacted in practice with each of the groups by creating this agenda inside the project. And this agenda, which can also be a folder, and now is essentially a slide deck, but in this agenda, the groups articulate who they are, what their vision was going into the project, the problems that they identified in their cities, the work that they did to gather knowledge around those problems, and then the solutions and the change propositions that they came up with in response to the problems that they identified. And so creating this agenda was a build-up, but in each of these milestones, we looked for opportunities to identify really practical and tangible outcomes that each of these groups would want to have by the end of the project. And we did this, throughout, doing things like surveys. So for example, in the first year of the project, we asked all the groups through a survey questions like, what is motivating you to be part of a project? What is most important to you out of this? And what would you like to have by the end of it? And we went deep and then in our working sessions to really identify, okay, what is it that you want to walk away with? Is it, a slide deck? Is it connections with government authorities? Is it, a teaser video? And so we really identified really practical things that each of these groups wanted to have as an outcome. And so once we identified these things, it was about weaving the practical things that emerge from each of the groups, and then the formal things that we set out to deliver from the beginning. And this was our main focus. And so to conclude, and I think reiterating what I was saying in the beginning, so for us in the project in TRIPS, our approach to co-design is really grounded around the notion of shared ownership. And this has meant that the groups in the 7 pilot cities are involved as equal contributors, and they have agency and decision-making power, and they control what this process is being used for. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Before we break for coffee, I would just like, I'm sorry, I'm off script, but I can't resist just sharing something. In this first half of the morning, I think we were all very pleased by Anca's and Andras' intervention. I particularly liked your slide with the chain link, which really shows that you get what innovation is about. Innovation isn't necessarily about new gadgets. It's about new values, new methods, new processes, new priorities. Yes, sometimes also new technology, but never just the technology. I think these 3 projects are a great example of that. That you also understand with that, like I said, the chain link thing, that innovation isn't just about, coming up with something new. It's also about understanding how can people adopt it, how can you then upscale and disseminate it, and that is a critically and often forgotten aspect of innovation, the diffusion. And finally, when you said, and I would take that as a challenge to all of us present here, that we must really lobby for increasing the budget for research and innovation in our domain, in this social dimension of transport, because otherwise, how can we really improve it? And that's something that we at Polis are completely available and happy to connect with all the organizations here to carry this effort forward, to lobby for more funding for the social aspect of transport innovation. It's critical. We continually say that you can't tech your way out of the biggest urban mobility challenges. They require policy, political decisions, new framings of the issues, and that has to be grounded on this social dimension of research. I think it's critical. So I would take that, Anca, thank you, is very positive. I can't resist also by just commenting that as somebody who has worked to promote change within a large public inertia-dominated organization, I often have had to deal with managers who, they are a part of that inertia, and they have these there's these systems of constraints and incentives that's what keep things in place. And people are afraid of change, naturally, because humans are wired to keep on doing what we do, because change means the unknown means risk, and risk 20,000 years ago got you eaten in the jungle. So people are naturally wired to be afraid of change. And what I found through practice is that one of the biggest sources of fear is that people don't know how to do it. And so when you come with a solid method, like any of these 3 fantastic projects does, that really lowers the resistance. Obviously, another thing is that, I come from public administration. The best way to get out of a problem is to say it doesn't have a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, it's not a problem, right? So what am I going to do about it? So really providing a method is critically important. Also, obviously, pointing out that other people have been able to do it, so why not us, is also critically important. And finally, as an advocate for participation and with some experience, I was really impressed by the presentations. I should say, I think they're high, as a participation practitioner, I think they're high quality. I'm very positively impressed and thankful for the invitation to be here, to be able to witness them. You know, if I would have to pick something out, I would pick two. One is the solid method, you know. Usually people, you know, let's do participation. Yeah, right, I mean, we're all Democrats, right? We're living in a democracy. It's a beautiful thing to do, you know, walls covered with Post-its. But people tend to forget that you need a solid method, that the participation, the design of the participatory process has to be closely intertwined with the decision process. It has to feed it. Otherwise, we're not doing participation, we're doing entertainment. That's a lack of respect for democracy, that's a lack of respect for the practice of participation, and obviously there's a lack of respect for participants. They don't want to be entertained. They want to have a seat at the power decisions, at the decision process. So let's have coffee. We'll make a shorter break, okay? I'm sorry for this. We'll make a 15-minute break and be back at 35. Check your watches, and we'll be shouting around and dragging you over.
Time to cut the chains, running unrestrained, uncaged, time above the summits, catch the sun's rays. So help me find my feet, give me the eyesight to find the lights to peace. Bring life with every line I speak, give me the strength to walk the line to peace.
Sometimes I'm obsessing over reasons not to try. This time I'm gonna fight. A journey to find a sense of peace and I desire. This time I won't look back. If I can catch a glimpse, maybe this time find the door to that peace of my mind. Peace of my mind. Find the door to that peace of my mind. Open up my eyes, yeah. Let me take a look inside, here's what I see. Let me see inside. Searching all the memories, find out who I be. Who am I anyway? Tell me who I am or what I'm supposed to be. Sometimes I'm obsessing over reasons not to try. This time I'm gonna fight. A journey to find a sense of peace that I desire. This time I won't look back. Yeah, yeah. If I could catch a glimpse, maybe this time find the door to that peace of my mind.
church was built where we played on the greens. A wall puts up in a garden of love. Soldiers and black hounds walking their rounds. Tombstones where flowers should be.
Now it seems as if we're used to the shaggy. We made our beds and now we hate where these beds be. Took nothing at all to part this Red Sea. I'm a shackled child, singing the good song of freedom. They've got no pride, they interrupt our grieving. Teardrops dropping for the pain of the world. My best friend dies when she was just a young girl. Left me here to fend for myself, now the pain never leaves. We just learn to cope, so when the devil needs hanging, will you tie up the rope and shout, pull? Let's put an end to this bull Zen thing. How many years before we practice what we preach? How many tears before we truly clinch the peak? Only to find that there is no honey on the moon. Official goon with the unofficial croon. I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it till my tard is. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it till my tard is. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? 16 bicycles, heartfelt recital. From the wacky blackie man, they should've called me Michael. Look at the monster you made, look at the monster you paid. But you claim no responsibility, cause it's each to himself in these times that we live. Does God have a sense of humor? Then the joke's on us, cause we're chasing our tails for how long? The tussle makes us house strong. Vintage poor people's fun. If we could ease up on these booze and fags, then just maybe life wouldn't seem so mad. Be a man, my dad said, but what the hell he know? He lost these dreams, he lost his flow. And I don't wanna be alone. I'm born king, so where's my throne? I'm too intense, I'm too deep, I'm too nice for life. So what makes this place so nervous? I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it till my tard is. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it till my tard is. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it to my TARDIS. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when and I'll take it to my TARDIS. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest? But you claim not. We're searching for Jesus, but I'll be damned if I'll be crucified. 10,000 spies, compulsive lies. They hate me, they love me, they hate me. Cause I'm all things to all men, all of the women, all the children. Just say when, and I'll take it to my TARDIS. Who's the hardest? Who's the hardest?
I've come a long way from that bitter sound. When you know what you know, when you feel what you feel, gives me chills through my heart. Oh, I feel so good inside. Oh, I feel so free with you by my side. Beautiful.
Good vibration, yeah. That's the positive vibes and we creating, yeah. The sounds that make you feel right, we keep it blazing, yeah. Forever shining this light, we keep it blazing, yeah. Boy, forever shining this light. Hey, thank the Lord, my cup is full and running over. All who never like we, I got love we know. Baby girl just text me, says she coming over. And when she reach it, want me fit turn off the phone. Turn the lights down low, turn up the stereo, yeah. Alton Ellis, Gregory, Isaac, Dennis Brown. Have you ever been in love? Now bad vibes can't stop this good vibration, yeah. That's the positive vibes we keep creating, yeah. Sounds that make you feel right, we keep it blazing, yeah. It's As long as we live in this life, we keep it blazing, yeah. As long as we live in this life, yeah. Ain't nothing wrong with melodies that touch your soul, no. They're acting like the people don't need it no more. Still when she hear that good music, she hold me closer. She groovy now, I know she feeling it for sure. She moved to me and rest her head up on my shoulder. Soothingly she tell me if it turn up the sound. Have you ever been in love? Now bad vibes can't stop this good vibration, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the positive vibes and we creating, yeah. Sounds that make you feel right, we keep it blazing, yeah. Forever shining this light, we keep it blazing, blazing. Forever shining this light, ooh yeah.
It's in the morning that I need your love, and in the evening when the sun goes down to the early morn, you keep me hanging on. And it's as simple as the sight of you that gets me going and soaks me through till the early morning. You keep me holding on. And it's the very thought of you that gets me through the night. And the knowing that I'll get it once more. It's the memory of your touch that keeps me from the light, and the scent of you on my pillow. Baby, the love that you give takes me to heaven, to paradise. Every note that you sing tells me I'm doing something right. Never wanted to please somebody so much in my life. In the early morning, I'm waiting to hear your bird song. Like flowers blooming in the morning sun, you do the night shift and you leave me drunk on your loving. Like a rose to my thorn. And it's the very thought of you that gets me through the night, and the knowing I will get it once more. Yeah. It's the memory of your touch that keeps me from the light, making love till cherries gone. Baby, the love that you give takes me to heaven, to paradise. Every note that you sing tells me I'm doing something right. Never wanted to please somebody so much in my life. In the early morning, I'm waiting to hear your bird song. I don't wanna be your part-time lover. Don't want you running to the arms of another.
Can we start? Yes. Before we go for lunch, we will be having a group discussions. So to save some of the shuffling time, it would be good that we would have in every table no less than 4 persons and no more than 5. So if your table has 3 people or 6, please shuffle now. I think you can either be generous and move to a table that has less people. Danielle? So, the nice lady with you? Yes. Yes, fair enough. And Imre is calling the attention to a very important aspect. Please mingle. It is forbidden to just cluster with your project partners. This is a dissemination-contamination event. If there's somebody you don't know, get up and go meet them. The gentleman, the nice gentleman in the middle, here's a table for you. So this table is now gender balanced. I don't see a man there. Oh, there's a man there. Sorry, I don't see. It's just I don't see well. Okay, can we start? Somebody find a table for Rebecca. Nobody wants her. Okay, there you go. So, with this, we can start. The next panel is really interesting. Users, what is low vision? Users, what is missing to be able to move like everyone else? Again, we have speakers from the 3 projects, Indimo, TRIPS, and Dignity. We will start with Evelien. Please, welcome.
Hi, I'm Evelien. I work as a project manager on for IMEC. This is the slides, all right. And I received the question from the Indimo partners to summarize our findings about the user assessment. So actually, all the research we have been doing the last 2 years about the Indimo project, which is all about users. So it's not an easy task. So I decided, instead of squeezing everything in 5 minutes, I'm not going to give you a summary, just going to tell you one story. A story about Anna. Anna is a lady in her late 70s, and she lives here in Brussels. And in the beginning of this year, she received a letter from the local municipality that unfortunately she's not allowed anymore to travel with her old car in the city center of Brussels due to the low emission zone and due to the restrictions they are in the beginning of this year. So Anna felt a little bit insecure, so what does she have to do now? I mean, she's never tried public transport before. She's not used to do it. Actually, she likes driving, but she doesn't know how these shared car services work. So, unfortunately, the last couple of months, she's been more isolated than before because she doesn't have the opportunity as much as she used to have to travel around. And on a Saturday afternoon, she got a visit from her friend, Marie, and she's explaining her problems to her, and Marie said, but Anna, let's just try and let's go out, have a coffee, and we go there using public transport. I'll show you how it works. I'll show you how you can read the schedule for the trains, how you know when your bus will arrive. I show you how you can buy your ticket, and I will show you where you can find the right information. And so Anna moved around, and she tried it a couple of times using these new services with a friend. And since then, she felt empowered to use it after a couple of times to use it by herself. And actually, this is what we need to do when we are creating new mobility services and digital services. We need to lower the threshold. We need to provide human assistance and the right guidance and the right trainings to empower people to really feel empowered enough to make use of them. That's the most important thing. And actually, I got the inspiration for this story last week when I was participating at a police conference. There was a civil servant of the municipality of Brussels that came to our booth. We demonstrated the application we developed for people with a visual impairment. And she says, like, hey, we have this Brussels Air reduction for people that are not allowed anymore to enter the city center. But we see that elderly people with low income, people that belong to an ethnic minority are not making use of it. So do you have any some kind of tips and tricks? And so actually the story I just told you was what I told her. I said, you really need to lower the threshold. And as a municipality, you also need to take into account these challenges. It's like making sure that you have a good link between a physical and digital environment. Like if you only have one bus every hour, people will not tend to take it. You need to make sure that the services on the ground are also functioning well, or are there too much delays? People will not trust them. They will also not make use of them. Also be aware that it's not just elderly people. You really have a lot of intra-group differences. I mean, you can have a 70-year-old that's very digital savvy. You have others that only make use of offline communication channels. So you need to diversify in that. And it's also a big tip I gave. I saw there was a representative of the UITP. So to your members, I think a big challenge is if you design new digital tools, you need to make them dynamic and customizable without increasing complexity too much. Because people have real different personal preferences and they need to be able to accord the settings accordingly. Also, we are pleading here to apply the universal design principles, but also take into account, like for people with a visual impairment, for example, you really need to have dedicated tools. They really need they have specific requirements and you need to deliver upon that. So I think in my story, I touched upon these main takeaways. I think also I ran through my 5 minutes, but I'll be here, and if you have any questions, just please reach out to me.
Evelien? On the upper right corner, it says, dare to dig deeper.
Yes, indeed. That's also something we found, like sometimes it's not good enough to send out a survey and ask for why are you not making use? Sometimes you really need to dig deeper and talk to the people, because sometimes people are very hesitant to express their fears. And it's not easy to admit that actually you don't dare to take public transport because you have heard that these drivers are sometimes riding reckless, or as a woman you feel insecure making use of ride sharing, and if you have never done it, I mean, people are not always willing to say publicly why they do things or don't. So that's why you dare to dig deeper.
Dare to dig deeper. I think that's a nice motto for our work. Thanks a lot. Well, I understand your point. I understand both points. We'll have to go to Nick, but we will pick up on that later. Thank you, Evelien. Yes. So, Nick Apeldoorn, the last time I saw this man make a wonderful presentation was about children participation. Yes, I remember. Now,
it was.
Up to you.
Hello, my name is Nick, and I'm a researcher for Breda University of Applied Sciences, and I focus on inclusive digitalization of society. And it's a very, very cool topic because so many things are happening now. We can build amazing stuff, but if people don't use it, it's pretty useless. So, as a researcher, I love quantitative data because it tells you that there is a problem. But I also love qualitative data because it tells you what the problem is. And that's exactly what we did. So we did a whole bunch of surveys, and then we had this customer journey mapping with people. So we asked them to plan a trip, go on a journey, have several touch points. For example, stepping in the bus, checking in, checking out, find your place to sit, find your next location to go to, and then ask them to rate their confidence level. And what we got is a whole bunch of very, very important stories. And we have 5 minutes, and I would like to share some stories with you. So the first thing is planning a journey. And here you see that a lot of people actually struggle with this. For example, the elderly. And we saw 4 main groups that struggle with it. Because you have these elderly that are not able to find the information or are completely reliant on someone else. Most are kids, sometimes they're partners. If it's their kids, then they are still reluctant to ask them for help because they don't want to be a burden. If they ask their partner, they often feel quite comfortable. But if the partner dies, then they're completely clueless. The other thing that happens are some people are able to find information, but don't trust that the information they find is correct. And that is also a big challenge, because if you don't feel certain that you will get to the destination that you need, you will be in trouble, and you will not be able to make that trip because you don't feel confident that you actually can make that trip. The third one we see, and I think this really represents my grandfather, able to find the information, trust that the information is correct, print it out, brings it on the train because he's not able to find it on the spot when he needs it. Something changed in the schedule, still lost. And here you see all these differences of people that have various different digital skills that face different challenges. And then you have some people that are actually able to find the information, trust it's correct, and especially with the elderly, these people are quite marginal. We only found 1 elderly in our interviews that actually said this. And that is a big problem. So in terms of planning a journey, we asked them to do it. Most of them were not able to do it by themselves, they needed a bit of help. And then we went to starting the journey. So we went to the bus, and we also interviewed, for example, people with lower incomes. And they felt a bit reluctant when they checked in. Do I have enough money on my card? And that is a big thing, because people hate to be embarrassed. They hate to be embarrassed, they have to stand in a line, they're not able to check in. Sorry, madam, you have to step out. These people often prefer to pay with cash because then they know how much money they have and how much they can spend. They can keep track of it. But with all this digitalization and cash virtually disappearing in the EU, it becomes a really big struggle for them because they don't feel the self-security. And for people in wheelchairs, every single person that we interviewed that was in a wheelchair mentioned that the bus just kept on driving when they were waiting at the bus stop. And that is awful. That's really, really awful. Because you have to travel, you have to go somewhere, and you just keep on driving. And last week there was in the news in the Netherlands that there was not enough people to serve our trains, that sometimes people in wheelchairs book weeks in advance to be on the train, have to get in the train with help, have to get out by the train with help. And then right when they arrive at the destination, there's no one there. And they keep saying you can go to the next stop, someone will help you out, and you can get a taxi to your location. That takes an extra hour in your schedule, and you have a meeting. You have days to plan. And these are things that people really face on a daily basis. And during the journey, for example, you are in a wheelchair, you have to find your seat. And there's someone sitting in the seat for people in a wheelchair. And you have to ask them to get out. And if you're lucky, people say, yes, I will do that. It happens very rarely that people say, yeah, of course. They jump out and they don't even have to ask for it. And if they keep on sitting, then the bus driver has to say to them, sir, you have to leave this chair. It's for that designated person in a wheelchair. or for that pregnant lady, or for the one with crutches. And that puts a spotlight on them, because they're not able at that point to solve their own problems. And they say they hate it when it happens. Even though they're capable, they're in their full right, they hate it when it happens. And during this journey, we asked them to give scores for all these things that they encounter on a daily basis. And we had a big interview with them to ask them, why do they give this score? And that is some of the stories that I just told you. These are important things that people face on a daily basis. And then we got the question like, we have to voice the needs of inclusive transport services. I think the first thing that we need to do, and it goes for every minority, for every people who is vulnerable to exclusion, people who are not that vulnerable have to speak up. What we're doing in our current society is not enough, because it's not helping enough people. People that you don't see in public transport, that you don't in the street, it doesn't mean that they're not there, they're in hiding. And that's why we need to do better. And in general, what all these people have in common, they don't want to be feeling embarrassed for their own inability. And don't get me wrong, these people are often super resilient, super creative, super capable. But if you get a spotlight on them for something that you can do yourself, we hate it. And that's a very human thing to feel. So the elderly, you see these 4 different stages that we identified in their capabilities. And they all have very different struggles, different problems, different ideas of how we can help them. And the same goes for people in wheelchairs, same for people with financial limitations. If you need for your sharing device a credit card to enter and you don't have a steady flow of income, you're basically excluded. If you have a website that's not accessible by screen reader, you're basically excluding people directly. These are just the basics, and we don't have that in order at the moment. It's a complex issue. They're often interconnected. If you're a bit older, if you're less capable physically, and if you have problems with digitalization, you're also more likely to have a lower education and are less able to, and therefore have a less well-paying job. And there you see this multifaceted of problems. They're often stacking effects. 1 is often not a problem, 2 becomes a problem, 3 is a problem. Thank you.
Really good. Thank you, Nick. Let's move to, I'll try. Laura Alčiauskaitė. Pretty good. So first of all, on behalf of the organization, I would like to embarrassedly apologize for holding this in a stage without providing you the means to access the stage. It's a major failure on our part, and we humbly and embarrassedly apologize. So, what I will do, and it just shows that when you work on inclusion, and particularly on accessibility, even if you are fully committed to it, you need to have an incredible attention to detail and a persistent, obsessive No, I've discussed this with Laura. You can sit, Lorenzo. Of course. Oh, you want to take it with your hand? Okay. Could have told me. I'm kidding. Sorry. But again, thank you. Sorry for this huge inconvenience. Please.
No worries. I mean, I'm very sorry I couldn't see all of you and I have to speak behind my back. But actually this environmental barrier is only a very small thing me or other people with disabilities face every day. So it's like, you know, accessibility is sometimes missing. But we did what we do, and I will be talking about the users now. But first, let me introduce myself. So my name is Laura Alčiauskaitė, pretty good pronunciation for Lithuanian surname. It's like a pain, I know. And I'm representing ANIL, which is European Network on Independent Living. And we are working with persons from all over Europe who are having certain types of disabilities. So it can be different access needs and different needs they're having.
The idiot moderator forgot the... See?
All good.
When disaster usually comes in pairs. You can just use the
Okay.
Don't ask me about tech stuff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will start first with the barriers. As I said, we persons with disabilities face them every day by using all means of transport. And here it's only like top 10, which were mentioned in our TRIPS project. Because in the TRIPS project, we did also lots of research. We had a qualitative research, which was consisted of 2 parts. It's like social media analysis and qualitative interviews with the users with different types of disabilities. And we also have a quantitative research collecting opinions from people from all over Europe, 21 European countries to be precise. And they named all these barriers, but they also were mentioned in the working directly with the groups, which was presented previously by my colleague Elvia. So here we made a list, and it's not the limited list because there are more, but that was the most mentioned. So what people said that they often facing barriers when they want to get on or off on a vehicle. It's very difficult in many cases to reach the transport for them because, okay, even if you have an accessible vehicle, sometimes the station is not accessible or platform is not accessible, so it also limits your journey. They also often mention that the station facilities such as ticketing machines, registration desks, even bathrooms are not accessible for people who need it. Another barrier I can relate a lot is like travel delays. And it happens because sometimes it's overcrowded, so you have to wait for another vehicle, for example, for another bus. Sometimes when you have transfer and you're facing barrier in a first step of the journey, you make late for your transfer and for another step of the journey. So it means like, okay, you reach your final destination way later than people who have no access needs. Comfort aboard is also something that people mentioned very often. For example, the space is occupied by someone else, as mentioned. There is no bathroom, there is no comfortable way to place yourself if you're in a wheelchair, and so on. So that's also something you need to have in mind. Access to information is mostly related with people who have intellectual or visual impairments, because they need information to be provided that's understandable and useful for them. Another barrier which is also mentioned a lot is like the attitude of the staff. Even though you have like service for accessibility, sometimes you face very rude personnel who are even there themselves to make remarks. Like, for example, I hear a lot, why can't you take a taxi? Or, oh, you should stay home, you know, it's not accessible, or things like that, you know. So, and it's very common. Accessing help is also difficult. For example, they have numbers. And if you're traveling, it happened my last time when I was in Brussels. I wanted to book assistance on the train. They speak only French. I don't speak French. So I had like very, very difficult, like I couldn't order help. Well, the friendliness is very much related with the attitudes. And getting users orientated, sometimes people are having difficulties to orientate to the space. And they also need support to find the assisting staff, for example. So that's also keep in mind. But what I wanted to say here is that the motto should be that accessibility is door-to-door issue. And it's like a chain. And if one part of the chain is broken, your journey won't be successful. It won't be comfortable. It won't be accessible. So that's something you need to have in mind. And there's another thing coming from our quantitative survey, which I also wanted to kind of emphasize. And we asked in the survey, like, people with different types of disabilities, how satisfied are they with the work of the authorities, so mostly having governments and municipalities in mind, how they include disabled people in what they're doing. And here you can see the distinguishment between people having different types of disabilities. But despite that, as you can see, no matter what type of disabilities, people feel that they're not included enough in making decisions in the work, or if something is created, they not feel that they are part of it. And it was quite low in all the countries. And similar results we received for the support, because, okay, you can advocate for yourself. We people with disabilities, we advocate a lot for ourselves, but that advocacy work would be easier if we have people supporting us. And there was also another question asking if the persons with disabilities are happy with the support that you're receiving, and also distinguishment according to the disabilities. And here it's also the number, it's quite low. People not feeling supported, understood, and encouraged to reach out for the change. So it's not only about environment, it's also about the attitudes a lot. It's about understanding and willingness to actually include people in transport and basically everywhere. But enough compliment, let's see what we can do for improvement. And these recommendations, they also came out throughout all the project. And I think my colleagues would agree that actually we found out a lot what we can do in the future. So the first one I would like to mention is that there is indeed a need of collaboration from all sides, not only from the user side, but everyone like to collaborate together and to work together, bringing transport providers, governments, and the users on board. When you're designing something for transport and you're creating something, you always should have accessibility in mind. As Pedro said, like, it's in the details, right? And those details should be there from the very beginning. Because it's easier to create something accessible from the beginning than fixing it later, spending resources, spending time to improve it. Keep that in mind. And to make sure that it happens, it's very important to have disability experts. And I would say that there are no better experts than people with disabilities themselves, because they exactly know what they need. I can exactly tell you what I need to have, like, I don't know, comfortable journey with a train. I will tell you in details if you want. But it's also important, like, to have them not only for the feedback, not only for rating something, evaluating something, have them from the beginning to the very end. And also, I will also support my colleagues' advocacy. Pay them. Don't expect people to work for free. That's very important. And another thing we did in a survey, we asked about accessible assistive technologies. And people are actually very keen to use those assistive technologies. That's why we worked a lot in trips with the accessible journey planners. But to make that happen, we need two things, is that to have the ownership of those assistive technologies, to making sure that it's created together with the people who will use them, and also improving the digital literacy of persons with disabilities. There's a still big gap between when it comes to using the technologies with people who have disabilities and who have not. Finally, it's important to consider the accessibility of vehicles in the current renewal of fleets in order to minimize the time delays and inability to board because it's overcrowded. That also, another recommendation came from the users directly, and we asked if the people are keen to use specialized transport, for example, accessible taxis, instead of like going to with the public transportation. And we had a very clear answer: no, we don't want specialized transport. We want to use public transport as everyone else, which is accessible and comfortable and inclusive. We don't want like to have segregated means of transport. That's also a very interesting thing, because there are lots of money spent, for example, in my country, to, I don't know, build something specialized for those people. And they don't use it because they don't want to be segregated. And the final one is also that comes to social attitudes and social barriers, that governments and transport authorities should invest in public campaigns to make order that, okay, if you're having accessibility in mind and you have stuff, educate them with the disability etiquette, because sometimes people, they have good intentions, but they don't know how to approach, how to help you. That could be very useful and actually not so much resource-consuming solution, because when you talk with people and they say, okay, the bus was not accessible, but the driver was completely nice, passengers were very helpful, I managed. That pays off, you know? So the attitude is also super important, and sometimes it can be a solution. I couldn't go on stairs, but Pedro was so extremely nice to support with the mic and everything. So I'm not saying that's the only solution, but that can help. So this is it. Thank you for your time. If you have questions, feel free to approach me.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Before we move on, sorry, just I can't resist saying, using the stairs as a learning opportunity, and picking on what, if I may, Laura, picking on what some of the aspects that Laura mentioned. I mean, I worked on accessibility for I still see myself as still working on accessibility, but I worked on accessibility as a professional at the local level for 15 years or more, and it's really challenging kind of work, and we, thanks to the help, first point picking up on the user expert aspect. I mean, there was this guy who I know helped with the TRIPS project called Diogo Martins, who uses a wheelchair and a ventilator, and basically he never was able to get a college degree because universities were not accessible. So basically he had to deal with a high school degree. He loved public transport. He invested his personal time, in which he had a lot, unfortunately, in learning about trains and planes and buses and all of this. And then one day I came across him. I don't remember how. And I invited him to come and cooperate with us for a short time. And he saved us in all things related to the accessibility of the whole city's public transport network. So user experts are really, if they're good, as with any other professional, they can be extremely, extremely useful, and I can humbly say, as an accessibility expert, that this guy was obviously better than I was, because I would never be able to reach his level. Not only because he has a disability, but because he has a higher foundation on which to build, and then he worked to build his technical capabilities. So yes, it's an untapped resource, people that should be trained. Here's something maybe in the future, how can we find ways to empower users to contribute more in the professional domain, not just showing up at consultation hearings, throughout the whole process as experts. How can we empower them? That's something very useful to explore. The other point is really, and that's why also it's so difficult and frustrating working on accessibility. It's because God is in the details always. Yes, it's it's a question of will and all of that, but it's details. Not only Laura showed a slide with all these 10 main obstacles. So within any trip, it's the details within each of those aspects, ticketing, but also between those aspects, getting to the bloody ticketing machine and then getting from the ticketing machine to the subway platform. So it's within these things and between. So it's really an obsessive attention to detail. And the attitude usually is, oh yeah, but though that's accessibility. Well, if you think about it, any electrical engineer or electrician for that matter, you can't just say, oh, I put the wires. What do I care if they don't connect? I mean, I'm just putting the wires. No. If everything doesn't connect, the light bulb won't go on, and maybe somebody gets electrocuted. Or with software developers, I mean, the code really has to work. If there's some bug in the code won't work. And that's for electricity or for software development and for so many other fields. There must be huge attention to detail. And the difficulty in paying attention to detail in accessibility is not because accessibility is difficult, but is because people don't care enough and don't take it seriously. The other point is about the habits. Habits are self-reinforcing. I mean, why do we have steps here? Probably having very few visitors in wheelchairs and even less speakers in wheelchairs really has never made it necessary to adapt the stage. So, and the same thing happens in public transport, because so few people use it, get to access to it, that it's a self-reinforcing thing, you know, and managers, obviously, within their own bubble think, I mean, why am I going to spend so much money on this? Because we have so few passengers with disabilities. Well, a lot of people exist, they're just not present. And finally, I can't resist to say this, sorry, in your face, I'm kidding, but digital app wouldn't solve this. So as we work for inclusive mobility and with technological innovation, it is critical to keep in mind that the digital world will only work if the physical world works. And yesterday I was watching a short presentation by the Combined Mobility Manager at UITP, the International Union for Public Transport, and there's a lot of discussion about MaaS, mobility as a service, and MaaS apps, and this and that. And she was pointing out exactly to this, that, okay, so let's come up with digital solutions, but public transport has to work. If it is, and we must support improvements in the public transport physical infrastructure, in the services, if we want to get great MaaS apps. You know, otherwise, we're just living in, you know, digital utopia. So, sorry again, Laura, and thank you for being such a good sport.
No, thank you. I couldn't agree more with you.
Yes. So, I know. So, we will have now a 20 minutes, very stressful and intense brain-squeezing process. So each table has 4 people, or 6, or somewhere in between. We will do it very simply in the following way. There is in your table an A3 sheet, and it has the following question. You can look at the page in a second. Please don't, wait. So, the question is, how to empower users and user organizations to voice their needs and to provide feedback about the inclusiveness of transport services. So we will squeeze your brains, we will ask you to put stuff on the page, and then our colleagues from the TRIPS project will collect all the feedback and use it to feed their own work. Now, the point here being, thanks a lot. Thank you, Laura. The point here being that we will do this because we have a limited amount of time. Thank you very much. We will do the following. So, somewhere along the way, we'll pick up the pen and write down. But at the start, we will do this. First, we will have 1 minute, I can check it, 1 minute where, you know, just everybody just be silent and think to yourself about the question. Then you will have around 10 minutes to put it in a Post-it and share with your colleagues. And then you'll have around 5 minutes to squeeze your discussion into a statement. Okay? It's a short time, so it has to be structured. Sorry to script it so much. So we will start 1 minute of silence, not in memory of anybody, but just 1 minute of silence now. Okay, so we can start group discussion. I would suggest, if I may, that in each table, to make sure that everybody gets going at the same time, that you share one idea per person round the table, and then you go round and round, so that each member of the group speaks as early as possible in the process. So, for example, Anca, you would share something, then Lorenzo will share something, then Laura will share something, then, sorry, Diana will share something, then back to Anca, like a card game. You go round and round until it becomes natural to everybody to speak. You have 10 minutes. Okay, our 10 minutes have gone. We have 5 minutes to come up for one statement per table. Okay? And then we'll go around with the mic. 5 minutes to squeeze into a statement.
Hello? Is it on?
So I take the tables randomly.
Hello?
Okay, just I need to remember which one I did and which one. Okay.
Yeah? Hello?
Right.
Using these 6 tables, these 3 and these 3.
6. Okay. Great.
Sorry.
Do we have a statement? You have 1 more minute. Okay, can we start? Okay, so the question was, again, how to empower users and user organizations to voice their needs and provide feedback about the inclusiveness of transport services. So we have 2 roaming mics. These microphones will be hopping from table to table. Please don't, our microphone holders are trained they are trained to hold their microphones and to not hand over the microphones to the speakers. Please don't try to take the microphones from their hands or they will bite. Okay? This means also be brief. Brief but interesting. So, starting here. Who's going to say something?
Yes, so our sequence of how to involve, how to empower would be proactive involvement of users' organizations as key actors, compensation for the time given, efficient and inclusive governance structures throughout the process, and then a proper follow-up of the implementation.
Thank you very much. A round of applause, please. Over there.
Hi. Our statement is equal transport for all through a campaign, mobilizing resources for action, mindset shift for closing the gaps, and a political will prioritizing inclusivity and creating bridges and synergies.
Thank you very much. Nicholas.
So we focus also on provide them with monetary compensation, of course, so payment for their feedback. Also, we have to integrate end-user experts in government bodies so they are prepared to, when they're rolling out new legislation on the matter. And finally, it has to be mandatory for transport providers to have some sort of assistance, whether it's digital or in person, in major transportation hubs for.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. Right here.
So for us, we want to provide options of means for communicating real-time information and feedback coming from users, where they can use safe and easy to access channels, resulting in relevant information for developers, operators, and policymakers that can be used in future development and policy.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay, so we looked at 2 aspects. One is what organizations should do to invite, co-design, to recognize the users as experts, to respect them as such, and to respect their knowledge. So we need a change in the mindset, but also a change in the organizational processes, their policies, and actually make it mandatory that no product or service will be actually in the real world unless it is created using universal design and co-design participatory processes. If they can't get procured, they won't be out there. So we have to make it. But we also wanted to, so we wanted to see also sort of increase the skills of citizens in design thinking from school. So we all have learned to voice our requirements, basically. So by adopting innovations, then we invite participation.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Oh, okay. Public transport authorities must invest resources to create comfortable environments and the right places to allow people to express themselves.
Thank you very much. That's what I call a statement. Yes, please.
Make users aware of your possibility of feedback and let them express openly, then use this feedback and show results, and do this regularly.
Thank you very much.
So we wrote, make sure that transport operators, authorities, fellow travelers, and researchers feel enough urgency and contribute to empowering user and user organizations.
Thank you very much.
We felt that the transport operators and other organisations need to show users that their feedback is listened to and responded to if they're going to be encouraged to give it, and that the feedback channels need to be easy to use and accessible for different user groups.
Thank you very much. I know we're about to have lunch, but come on, put more energy in those claps. Come on, come on. Who goes next? Over there.
Yeah, I don't know if you have really a statement, but the paradigm shift through empowering users, creating safe space, a reliable and continuous space where express themselves, more or less in the line of what was expressed before, and training user association from local, regional, national, and over European and world level for advocating for their to be able to advocate incidents and lobby for inclusive transport.
Thank you very much. Over here.
So we talked about the fact that user experience is very important and that there should be some recognition for users who are involved, whether that be monetary, but to ensure that they feel valued. And we talked about the fact that you need to set clear expectations, have transparency, and ensure that you include sustainable feedback in order to actually scope out what's gone on, and therefore you can create actual action at the end of it that will be beneficial for the process.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Well, our statement is that first of all you need to ask them and you need to find them where they usually like gathering or the communication channels that they like using. Then hire them, involve them in the everyday work of planning, design, policy making, and take them seriously. And make clear what is in it for them. And as Floridea said, create a safe place to have an open conversation so they don't feel alone and embarrassed to voice their concerns.
Yes, thank you very much.
So we formulated a very general statement, like increase the visibility of the disabled users' needs through a sustainable collaboration framework of the key players' ecosystem. And by this we mean you have to hear them, provide feedback, and then create a framework on the involvement of the decision makers so that they stimulate. Actually, that's a little bit in line with what Tali said, like that there are conditions for accessibility and targets for accessibility. And then it might work when it will be a little bit stimulated from top down.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to finish. Thanks a lot. So, I was not invited for my time management skills, as you can obviously see. We will have lunch now. I'm not sure how much time we can have for lunch, but before you get up, please leave the A3 papers on the table because the colleagues from the TRIPS project will pick them up. And we can move to lunch, is that correct? And the last one to the soup counter. Won't get any soup, please. Bon appétit.
Let it break, let it play on. See it's made when the day is fading. Give it dues when the summer comes. Body stress when it blooms for you. Yellow birds dancing in the sun. Love is testing when it's true. Give it dues when the summer comes. Body stress when it blooms for you.
Excuse me, I just forgot to say something important. Something important, Imre. Something.
We want to try the application that we have developed for people with a visual impairment. In 15 minutes, our demonstration will be ready, so I invite you to come and test it.
Okay, that's it. Good lunch. Thank you.